How did Qatar Airways go from a tiny Gulf carrier to one of the most awarded airlines in the world? That's what we'll find out in today's episode of How Did They Do It? Qatar Airways was founded in 1994 and is headquartered in the Qatari capital of Doha. The new airline started off small. Its first aircraft was a Boeing 707, and it only had two destinations, Kuwait City and Dubai. The reason for starting an airline was to connect Doha with the outside world. But back in 1994, Qatar didn't have much money, and so the airline started with just two planes, one spare engine, and 168 employees. So early on, the focus was on keeping costs low. But in 1997, something changed. After the Qatari government bought out the original investors, they injected a lot of capital into the airline, and Qatar Airways became a state-owned enterprise. This turned out to be a very smart move because suddenly the little airline could start growing. It would take them less than 3 years to double their fleet size, and in 2000, they'd add their first wide-body jet, the Boeing 777. This allowed them to fly further afield, which in turn increased demand for tickets. But Qatar was still seen as a budget airline. They were even compared to Southwest Airlines. Because of their high frequency of flights within the Gulf states, by 2003, the airline carried more than 5 million passengers, and over the next few years, they continued to add new destinations, most notably London in 2007. Followed by New York in 2008. They had finally shed their low-cost image and had established themselves as a premium airline. But things were about to get a lot better. In 2010, they would receive their first Airbus A350. At the time, this was a relatively new model, and Qatar was one of the first airlines to take delivery of it. They then went ahead and ordered 50 more A350s. Now these are very expensive planes. Depending on the configuration, they can cost anywhere between $150 to $200 million each. So that meant that Qatar had deep pockets. This investment in modern equipment allowed them to operate at a lower cost, while providing more comfort to customers. It also allowed them to access new markets such as Africa. But Qatar wasn't just buying new planes, they were also upgrading their existing fleet. In 2011, they launched a massive cabin refurbishment program for their business class. Their 777s got new seats and improved features, while their A330s were getting new interiors and lie-flat beds. This was all done in-house. All of their planes were repainted in their signature burgundy color, which helped increase brand recognition. By 2012, they'd become the biggest airline in the Middle East by total number of passengers carried. And in 2013, they reached another major milestone. They joined Oneworld, an alliance of some of the most prestigious airlines in the world. The other members were British Airways, American Airlines, Cathay Pacific, Qantas, Japan Airlines, and so on. To join an alliance like this is a huge achievement because it shows how strong and reliable the airline is. Other member airlines recommend their passengers fly with them, and they're part of a wider network. As a result, Qatar's passenger numbers continued to grow year after year. They opened new lounges. They even launched their own frequent flyer program. And as the company grew, its revenue grew. With that, they could afford to purchase even more aircraft. And in 2014, they started taking delivery of their next big thing, the Boeing 787. The airline ordered 60 of them. Again, this is another very expensive jet. It costs about the same as the A350, if not more. But that didn't stop Qatar from buying even more planes. Throughout the late 2010s, they continued to expand their route map. And now, they flew to over 150 destinations across Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas, and Oceania. Over the years, Qatar had transformed itself from a tiny local airline to a giant international carrier. It had become a formidable competitor to other Gulf airlines like Emirates and Etihad. But they were missing something. They didn't have a good enough airport in Doha. The old Doha International Airport was struggling to handle the increasing number of passengers. It had become too small, and it lacked the capacity to keep up with Qatar's ambitious growth plans. So in 2014, they decided to build a brand new airport. They named it Doha Hamad International Airport. And it was quite a spectacular project. It covered 29 square kilometers, which is almost the same as the entire city of Paris. When it opened, it had the capacity to handle 20 million passengers per year. But it wasn't just the size of the airport that impressed people. It was also the design and the technology. It was the first airport in the world to feature a fully automated baggage handling system. It also had a giant indoor tropical garden, duty-free shops, fancy restaurants, and even a luxury hotel. The airport had the capacity to expand. But if Qatar ever wanted to grow, they'd need to grow their workforce. When the airline started, they had fewer than 200 employees. But by 2019, they employed nearly 30,000 people from 170 countries. The headquarters of the airline is located right next to the airport. It was designed by Iraqi-British architect Zaha Hadid. Their staff work in a 37,000 square meter office space that caters for 5,000 employees. This ultra-modern building has won multiple awards for its unique design. Now, throughout the 2010s, Qatar had a solid plan and they stuck to it. They maintained a young and modern fleet, kept investing in new technology, kept expanding their route map, and they kept joining new alliances. They joined the International Air Transport Association, which gave them access to more data and expertise. But they wouldn't always agree with IATA. For example, in 2017, IATA asked Qatar to stop flying to Iran, but Qatar refused. This brings us to 2017, a year where everything changed. Saudi Arabia, along with the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt, severed all diplomatic ties with Qatar. They accused them of supporting terrorism, which Qatar denied. But the damage was already done. Qatar's neighbors blockaded the country, which meant that Qataris couldn't travel to or through these countries. If Qatar Airways wanted to maintain flights to these places, they would have to do it alone. It forced Qatar to accelerate their growth plans. They added dozens of new routes to their network and rerouted many others. This required them to lease additional aircraft so they could keep serving their customers. During the same year, their business class was ranked as the best in the world by TripAdvisor. They'd been awarded Airline of the Year by Skytrax for the second time, and they were named Best Airline in the Middle East for the 8th consecutive year. But the political crisis brought financial challenges. They were forced to spend more money on fuel, because they no longer had access to cheap transit points. They couldn't serve some of their destinations directly, which meant higher operational costs. The blockade made many wonder if Qatar Airways would survive. But they did. They actually came out stronger, and it's hard to imagine how they could have handled the situation any better. During the pandemic, while most airlines grounded their fleets, Qatar Airways kept flying. They were one of the only airlines to maintain daily flights to China. They flew to over 80 destinations across Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, and South America. While other airlines saw massive losses, Qatar Airways made a profit. In 2021, they received yet another major award. They were voted Airline of the Year by the readers of Business Traveler magazine. But nothing lasts forever. In 2022, Qatar lost another prestigious award. They were no longer Airline of the Year, according to Skytrax. Instead, the award went to their rival, Emirates. It was the first time in 10 years that Qatar hadn't won. Despite this, Qatar Airways remains one of the best airlines in the world. They continue to invest in new technology and they continue to grow. They recently ordered 25 Airbus A321neo. These are smaller, cheaper jets that will allow them to open more routes. They'll be based out of Doha Hamad International Airport, which continues to expand. So the next time you see a Qatar Airways plane, remember that it was almost the worst airline in the world. Today, it's known as one of the best. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll see you then.